Have you ever been branded as ungrateful for simply standing up for what was rightfully yours? Have you ever had everything you were promised, everything your parents worked for, snatched away by the very people who called themselves your family? That's where my story begins. My name is Aisha, and for as long as I can remember, I believed blood meant loyalty. I believed that family was the one shield you could count on in this cold, selfish world. I thought that if anyone would protect me, it would be them. But I was wrong. Because when the time came, when my father's last will was read, when my mother's dreams for me should have been honored, my own relatives, my own siblings, looked me dead in the eye and told me I wasn't worthy. They didn't just take away my inheritance. They stripped away my dignity. And when I had the audacity to demand fairness, they spat the ugliest word in my face, ungrateful, after years of sacrifice, after standing by their side when they needed me most, after being the one who never asked for anything except what was already mine. Ungrateful. That word became a wound, but also a fire. Because if they thought I'd just walk away broken and defeated, they didn't know me at all. No, I didn't scream. I didn't fight in public. I didn't beg. I smiled. And deep inside, I made a silent promise. I will make you pay. Every penny you stole, every drop of dignity you thought you crushed, I'll take it back piece by piece. What followed was not just revenge. It was justice. A carefully crafted game of patience, strategy, and relentless determination. And today, I want you to walk with me through this journey. From betrayal to planning to the final sweet moment when the tables turned. And they were left with nothing but regret. Because this isn't just my story, it could be yours. Anyone who has ever been betrayed, manipulated, or gaslighted by the people they trusted most will feel the sting of what happened to me. So sit back, listen closely, and maybe ask yourself, what would you do if the people you loved most stole the very future your parents left for you? But before we dive deeper, do me a favor, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Trust me, by the end, you'll have plenty to say. To understand why this betrayal cut so deep, you need to know who I was before it all happened. I grew up in a modest home, nothing extravagant, but filled with labor, so I believed. My father, a stern but kind man, worked hard to build a small business from scratch. He wasn't rich by the world's standards, but to us, he was a hero. Every rupee, every dollar he earned came with sweat on his brow and calluses on his hands. My mother was the heart of the house, gentle, patient, always reminding us that family was worth more than gold. I was the youngest of three. My brother, Samir, was the eldest. Charismatic, bold, always treated like the crown prince. Then there was my sister, Miriam, who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. And then me, quiet, dutiful, never demanding, the one who always blended into the background. But despite those differences, I believed we were close. I believed we'd stand by each other when the world turned cold. I'd cover for Samir when he wasted money or stayed out too late. I'd help Miriam with her studies, even while sacrificing my own free time. And when my parents grew older, I was the one who stayed home, the one who made sure they were cared for. My father often told me, Aisha, your loyalty will be rewarded one day. And my mother would nod, adding, we've written everything clearly in our will. You won't have to fight for your share. But you see, the human heart, it's a strange thing. It hides greed like a snake under the grass, waiting for the right moment to strike. When my father passed away, it was like the light in our house dimmed forever. He left behind not just memories, but assets, land, savings, and the business he had built with his own hands. My mother followed him just a year later, and in her final breath, she whispered to me, don't let anyone tell you you're less than them. I clung to those words like a lifeline, but I never imagined how quickly I'd need them. The day of the will reading came. The lawyer's office smelled of old paper and polished wood. My hands trembled as I sat beside Samir and Miriam, waiting to hear my parents' last words. My heart pounded with grief, but also with a strange hope. This was the moment my sacrifices, my patience, would be acknowledged. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began to read. My father had indeed been clear. The business would go to Samir, the house would go to Miriam. And the land, the savings, my education fund, they were all meant for me. It wasn't favoritism, it was fairness. My parents knew I had given up the most, and this was their way of honoring that. But then, the whispers started. Samir leaned back in his chair, smirking. Miriam crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. Ungrateful, Samir muttered under his breath. Mom and Dad spoiled her. She doesn't deserve it, Miriam added, her voice dripping with disdain. I froze. Spoiled didn't deserve it. The lawyer kept reading. oblivious, but I felt the ground shifting beneath me. In the days that followed, their whispers turned to actions. Samir claimed the business had debts and needed all the funds to survive. Miriam insisted the land was family property and shouldn't be sold. Every time I raised my voice, they shut me down with the same poisoned word, ungrateful. Ungrateful. For demanding what was legally mine. For refusing to let them erase my parents' final wishes. I tried reasoning with them. I reminded them of the nights I stayed up when my father was ill. The mornings I spent running errands. The years I delayed my own life for the family. But their eyes were cold, their voices sharper than knives. And then it hit me. These weren't the siblings I thought I had. These weren't protectors. They were predators, circling, ready to devour. That's when something inside me shifted. The quiet, dutiful Aisha died the moment they spat that word at me. In her place rose someone colder, sharper, determined. I knew then, if they wanted a war, they'd get one. But not the kind they expected. I wouldn't scream or beg. I wouldn't play into their hands. No. My revenge would be patient, precise, painful. Because I had one thing they underestimated, the ability to outthink them the more. I tried to reason. The worse it got, every visit to the family house turned into a battlefield. Samir's voice would boom across the living room. You've always been a leech, Aisha. Dad gave you too much already. Don't come crying for more. And Miriam, she would sit there, smug, tossing her hair back as though she were some queen on a throne. If you were really grateful, she sneered one night, you'd hand it all back to us. Family property belongs with family. The irony cut like glass, weren't we family? Their words weren't just insults. They were meant to break me, to convince me I was unworthy, to gaslight me into surrendering what my parents had entrusted to me. But each cruel remark only fueled the fire burning inside. The breaking point came when I discovered they had already begun selling parts of the land without my permission. The papers bore forged signatures, lies inked in black. I confronted them, shaking with fury. How dare you? I cried, slamming the documents on the table. Samir only smirked. What are you going to do about it, little sister? Sue your own blood. That would make you even more ungrateful. That word again, that cursed word. In that moment, something inside me hardened into steel. I realized they wouldn't stop. They'd strip me of everything until nothing remained. Unless I made them pay. And that's when the plan began to form. At first, it was just a flicker of an idea. But like embers fed with oxygen, it grew into a roaring flame. I didn't want just to reclaim what was mine. I wanted them to feel the humiliation they had poured on me. I wanted them to choke on the very word they had weaponized against me. So I started quietly. Patiently. Step 1 was gathering information. While Samir boasted about his business empire, I knew the truth. He was reckless. He borrowed heavily, made rash investments, and treated the company like a personal piggy bank. All I needed were the records. So I befriended one of his accountants, pretending to understand business in my free time. A few coffee meetings later, I had enough files to expose every shady deal he had hidden. Step 2 was Miriam. My sister had always been obsessed with appearances. Her social circle admired her wealth, her perfect family, her so-called charity work. But what they didn't know was that she siphoned money from the very charities she bragged about. I had proof bank slips my father had once shown me, warnings about Miriam's habits. With a little digging, I uncovered more. Step 3. Timing. Revenge wasn't just about striking, it was about striking when they least expected it, so I waited. I played the role of the defeated sibling, pretending to back down. I stopped arguing, stopped showing anger. To them, I must have looked like I had surrendered. Samir gloated louder. Miriam mocked me in front of neighbors. Poor Aisha, they would say. So ungrateful. She doesn't understand family. And behind my smile, I whispered, keep talking, your downfall is coming. The first blow landed on Samir's birthday. He had organized a grand party, inviting business associates, friends, even local politicians. I walked in quietly, unnoticed at first, dressed simply. Then, as he raised his glass to boast about another profitable year, I stepped forward with a folder in hand. Funny, I said loudly, cutting through the music. Because according to these records, your profits are built on loans you can't repay. Care to explain the offshore account? Samir? Gasps filled the hall. His face turned pale, his glass slipped from his hand. I laid the documents on the table, each page a nail in his coffin. Associates muttered, partners frowned, and in minutes, his carefully crafted empire began to crumble. The second blow came weeks later. Miriam hosted a charity gala. shining in her designer gown. Cameras flashing. I waited until she made her speech about generosity and kindness. Then I pulled up receipts, bank records, all projected on the big screen. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, here's where your donations really went straight into Miriam's private account. The silence was deafening. Then came the whispers, the judgmental stares. Her friends turned away, disgusted. By the end of the night, Miriam's reputation was in ruins. Each step of my plan was precise, calculated. I didn't just want justice, I wanted them to taste the very bitterness they forced down my throat. And they did. But even as they scrambled, as their world collapsed, I wasn't done. Because the final strike would come when they were weakest, when they had no defense left. And believe me, it was coming. If this story has you hooked, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been betrayed by the people closest to you? The day of reckoning didn't come overnight. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and mine had been chilling in the freezer of my heart for months. Every insult, every dismissal, every whispered comment about how ungrateful I supposedly was. It all played like a movie reel in my head. I still remember the moment I decided it was time. One had gathered all the documents, every bank record, every piece of evidence showing how my inheritance, what my parents had left from me, had been siphoned away by my so-called guardians. They thought I would never question the numbers, never look beyond the smiling lies they fed me. But I had been patient enough to build my case like a fortress no one could tear down. The day I walked into that lawyer's office, I wasn't the timid, broken girl they had tried to mold. I was a storm in human form. I laid the evidence out on the polished wooden desk, my hands steady, my voice firm. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman with decades of courtroom experience, leaned forward and let out a low whistle. "You have them cornered," she said. "If this goes to trial, they won't just lose the money. Their reputation will be shredded." That was all I needed to hear. But I didn't stop there. No, simple justice wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel what I had felt: small, powerless, terrified that everything you hold dear could vanish in an instant. So I set the trap. First, I filed the legal papers quietly, making sure they were served without warning. Imagine their shock when the summons arrived, neatly folded in an envelope, accusing them of fraud, embezzlement, and breach of trust. I pictured their smug smiles cracking into panic, their carefully crafted facade collapsing. But the real strike came later. I organized a family gathering. Under the pretense of reconciliation, they thought I was ready to forgive, to patch things up like the dutiful child they always wanted me to be. The living room was full: cousins, aunts, even a few family friends who had always believed my foster parents' version of the story. I stood there, holding a folder in my hands, my heart pounding like a drum. My foster mother smirked, already preparing her speech about how I had finally come to my senses. But when I opened that folder, silence fell. One by one, I pulled out the documents, the forged signatures, the unauthorized withdrawals, the luxury purchases made in their name while my future was being stolen. Gasps filled the room. My foster father's face turned pale. My foster mother's smirk vanished into a tight, trembling line. "You told everyone I was ungrateful," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the tension. "But here's the truth. You stole my inheritance. You drained my future. And then you dared to paint me as the villain." Their eyes darted around the room, searching for allies, but all they found were glares and whispers of disgust. For once, they had no script to follow, no lies strong enough to hold. The climax came in court. I'll never forget standing there as the judge read through the evidence, her voice echoing in the chamber. My foster parents sat across from me, shrunken versions of the powerful figures they once pretended to be. When the verdict was announced: full repayment of my inheritance with penalties and legal fees, the weight of victory crashed over me like a tidal wave. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my voice, my dignity, my right to exist without their shadow looming over me. As we left the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Questions flew like arrows. "How do you feel? Do you think justice was served?" I didn't answer them all. I just looked into the nearest camera and said, "They called me replaceable. They called me ungrateful. But today, they learned I was never the problem. And with that, I walked away, not the broken child they once tried to control, but the woman who had burned their empire to ash. When the gavel fell and the courtroom emptied, I expected to feel only triumph. And yes, there was victory, sweet, undeniable, and satisfying. But there was also something else, a quiet sadness, because no matter how much money they paid back, no matter how public their humiliation was, I couldn't erase the years they had stolen from me still. There was healing and justice. In the weeks that followed, I used the settlement not for revengeful indulgence, but for building the life I had always dreamed of. I invested part of it into a home, small, warm mine, a place where no one could tell me I didn't belong. The rest, I saved carefully, determined to never again let anyone dictate my future. And as for my foster parents, their downfall was swift. With their reputation destroyed, the community that once admired them now turned its back. Friends stopped calling. Family whispered behind their backs. They had thought themselves untouchable, but in the end, they were as fragile as the lies they built their lives upon. I won't lie, sometimes late at night, I replay those moments in my head. The sneers, the accusations, the countless times they made me feel like I wasn't enough. And then I remember the look on their faces in court, the shock, the shame, the silence. That memory reminds me that I didn't just win money back, I won myself back. Before we close, let me ask you this. Have you ever been made to feel like you were unworthy of what was rightfully yours? Have you ever been told you were replaceable, only to prove them wrong? Because that's what this story is really about. Not just inheritance, not just betrayal, it's about reclaiming power. It's about standing tall in the face of those who tried to break you on, proving that they could never succeed. And as for the final chapter of my story, well, it's still being written. Every day that I wake up free from their shadow, every step I take toward building a future that's truly mine, that's my revenge. That's my victory. So, what do you think? Did they deserve it? Or do you believe in second chances? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell because more stories of betrayal, justice, and triumph are coming your way.